German generals were stunned when their own map lied to them. During Operation Barbarossa in 1941, German planners relied on outdated Soviet maps. Entire roads, rivers, and rail lines simply did not exist as expected. Logistical collapse followed, undermining the advance toward Moscow. June 22, 1941, Eastern Poland. Dawn. Engines rumble in the half-light, a deep mechanical growl rolling across fields heavy with morning mist. Staff cars idle beside command tents. Radios crackle in clipped German voices, sharp and confident. Somewhere to the east, beyond the tree line and the invisible border, the Soviet Union waits, silent, vast, and largely unknown. Inside a command vehicle parked just off a dirt road, General Oberst Franz Halder, chief of the Army General Staff, leans over a folding map table. The paper beneath his gloved hands is smooth, creased from weeks of planning. Lines in red pencil carve eastward in bold, decisive strokes. Arrows point toward Minsk, Smolensk, Moscow. Distances are measured. Timetables are neat. Everything is precise. The map tells a story of speed. According to the paper, the roads ahead are solid, reliable arteries. Rail lines stretch forward like veins, ready to carry fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. Rivers are thin blue threads, manageable crossings, minor obstacles. Villages are marked, towns spaced conveniently apart. It is a landscape that promises momentum. Halder straightens, satisfied. Years of staff work, simulations, and war games have led to this morning. Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in human history, is about to begin. 3 million men, thousands of tanks, nearly 4,000 aircraft. The Wehrmacht stands poised to smash the Soviet state in a campaign expected to last weeks, not months. At precisely 3:15 a.m., the eastern horizon flashes white. Artillery opens up along a front nearly 2,000 miles long. Bridges explode. Soviet border posts vanish in fire and smoke. Luftwaffe bombers roar overhead, their engines howling as they streak toward airfields marked carefully on German charts. The invasion begins exactly as planned. At first, the map seems truthful. Panzer columns surge forward, steel tracks chewing through soil and grass. Infantry divisions follow on foot, boots striking the ground in endless rhythm. Radio reports flood in, enemy units surprised, resistance scattered, roads captured intact. Commanders mark progress directly onto their maps, red arrows advancing almost on schedule. But within days, subtle discrepancies appear. A motorized infantry battalion reaches a junction that, according to the map, should connect to a paved road leading northeast. Instead, they find a narrow farm track dissolving into mud. Trucks bog down almost immediately. Drivers swear. Officers check their compasses, then the map again. The junction is correct. The road is not. Elsewhere, a panzer division moves toward a river crossing indicated as shallow and fordable. When the lead tanks arrive, they discover a wide marshy floodplain. The river swollen and slow-moving, its banks unstable. Bridging equipment is summoned, but the delay stretches from hours into a full day. Soviet units, previously believed to be retreating in chaos, reappear and open fire. In headquarters tents across the front, officers begin circling map symbols with question marks. The German maps being used, many compiled before the war, some based on Czarist-era surveys or commercial atlases, were never designed for a campaign of this scale. Large portions of the Soviet interior had been poorly mapped, deliberately obscured, or inaccurately recorded. Roads marked as all-weather routes are nothing more than dirt tracks. Rail lines shown as continuous simply end. Villages have moved. Rivers shift with the seasons. Yet in these first days, confidence remains high. Reports emphasize encirclements, prisoners captured by the tens of thousands, Soviet divisions collapsing under the shock of the attack. Commanders reassure themselves that logistical hiccups are temporary. The enemy is breaking. Moscow lies hundreds of miles away, but the timetable still looks achievable. Still, among supply officers and quartermasters, unease grows. Fuel convoys arrive late or not at all. Ammunition columns wander unfamiliar terrain, guided by maps that promise bridges where only burned timbers remain. Horses, hundreds of thousands of them, still essential to German logistics, collapse from exhaustion pulling wagons through terrain that offers no firm ground. The land itself resists. Dust clouds choke engines during the day. At night, dew turns roads slick. Villages expected to provide shelter and supplies are abandoned or stripped bare. Local guides, when found, give directions that contradict German charts and often contradict each other. Halder records concerns in his diary, noting delays and unexpected terrain difficulties. The language is clinical, restrained. No one at the top is ready to admit the deeper truth. The Wehrmacht is advancing into a country that does not exist on its maps. And with every mile eastward, the gap between paper and reality widens. As the summer sun climbs higher over the endless plains, the first cracks appear in the grand design, not from Soviet counterattacks, but from inked lines that never matched the ground beneath German boots. June 28, 1941. Near Minsk. Late afternoon. ****. The heat hangs low and oppressive, pressing down on men and machines alike. A column of German supply trucks sits motionless along what the map insists is a primary road. Drivers have killed their engines. Radiators hiss softly. Dust coats everything. Faces, uniforms, rifle stocks, turning field gray into the same dull brown as the earth beneath their boots. Major Ernst Keller, a logistics officer attached to 4th Army, steps down from his staff car and walks forward, map case tucked under his arm. He stops where the road simply ends. Ahead of him, the ground breaks apart into rutted fields and knee-high grass. There is no gravel. No dranig ditch. No sign that heavy vehicles ever passed this way. Just a faint track winding between farms, already chewed into mud by the weight of trucks that followed blindly, trusting the paper more than their eyes. Keller opens the map again, smoothing it against the hood of his car. The road is clearly marked. A thick, confident line running east toward Minsk. He traces it with his finger, then looks up, scanning the horizon. Nothing. This is the road, he mutters, half to himself. Behind him, an NCO shakes his head. Herr Major, if this is a road, then Russia has a different definition. The delay stretches into hours. Engineers are called forward to improve the track, but they lack gravel, timber, even proper tools. Horses strain against wagons, hooves sinking deep. A truck attempts to push through and snaps an axle. Another overheats and must be abandoned on the spot. Far ahead, panzer units wait for fuel that does not arrive. This scene repeats itself again and again across the front. According to German maps, the Soviet Union is crisscrossed by a network of reliable roads. In reality, much of European Russia relies on seasonal tracks, passable in dry summer weeks, impassable after a single storm. The German army, designed for fast, mechanized warfare on the paved roads of Western Europe, is now at the mercy of geography. Railways offer no relief. German planners assumed captured Soviet rail lines would be quickly repaired and pressed into service. But the tracks are built to a different gauge. Locomotives cannot simply roll east. Converting miles of rail requires time, equipment, and labor, none of which are abundant at the front. Trains back up at transfer points. Supplies pile up uselessly. Ammunition intended for frontline units sits hundreds of miles behind them. Inside Army headquarters, situation maps grow cluttered with annotations. Arrows stall. Timetables are scratched out and rewritten. Officers begin speaking in cautious phrases. Temporary congestion, local difficulties, minor delays. Yet the delays compound. Panzer Group commanders send increasingly urgent messages. Tanks are operational, crews ready, opportunities ripe, but fuel is rationed to a trickle. Engines are shut down to conserve petrol. Reconnaissance patrols are cancelled. Momentum bleeds away, mile by mile. Meanwhile, Soviet forces, initially stunned, begin to regroup. What the German maps failed to show is not just missing roads but space. Immense space. Villages are farther apart than expected. Distances between rail junctions stretch longer. Retreating Soviet units exploit this depth, falling back beyond the reach of German supply columns, buying time with every kilometer. When German troops reach Smolensk in July, the victory feels hollow. The city is taken, yes, but at a cost in time and where that no plan accounted for. Vehicles require constant maintenance. Horses die in alarming numbers. Replacement parts are scarce. General Halderstudies reports late into the night. The language has shifted. Words like friction and strain appear with growing frequency. He writes of the unexpected nature of the Russian road system and the severe burden on transport units. Still, no one speaks openly of failure. The maps remain spread across tables, consulted daily, their authority unchallenged. Lines are redrawn, routes adjusted. Commanders convince themselves that once Moscow is reached, once the Soviet center collapses, these logistical problems will vanish. But the land refuses to cooperate. Late one evening, as thunderheads gather on the horizon, a light rain begins to fall. Within hours, dirt tracks dissolve into sludge. Trucks sink to their axles. Horses panic and strain. Men curse as they push, slip, fall. The season has a name in Russia, Rasputitsa, and on German maps it does not exist. July 10th, 1941. East of Smolensk. Early morning. Mist drifts low over the water, curling around reeds and broken tree trunks. The river looks calm at first glance, its surface barely rippling in the pale light of dawn. But as the lead German reconnaissance patrol edges closer to the bank, the illusion breaks. The water spreads wide, far wider than expected, swallowing what should have been firm ground. Lieutenant Hans Brewer lowers his binoculars slowly. He turns back toward the waiting column of armored vehicles and shakes his head. "This isn't right," he says. The map shows a narrow crossing, maybe 30 meters. In front of him, the river stretches nearly twice that width. Its banks are soft, unstable, the recent rains having transformed the surrounding land into a marshy basin. Any vehicle attempting to cross without proper bridging equipment will sink almost immediately. Brewer kneels and unfolds the map on the damp grass. The river is there, clearly marked, thin blue line, a modest obstacle at most. According to German intelligence, it should be easily fordable in summer. But Russia does not behave like the map says it should. Across the Eastern Front, rivers defy expectation. Seasonal flooding, poorly documented tributaries, and decades of environmental change have altered waterways beyond recognition. In some places, bridges shown on maps were dismantled years earlier. In others, rivers once shallow now run deep and fast, their banks eroded into traps for wheeled and tracked vehicles alike. Engineers are summoned, their bridging units already overworked. Pontoon equipment lags far behind the spearhead, stuck on roads that barely exist. Infantry units wait under the sun, exposed and vulnerable, while Soviet artillery begins to range in from the far bank. Shells whistle overhead. One detonates near the water's edge, sending up a column of spray and mud. Men dive for cover. The crossing, which should have taken minutes, now threatens to consume the entire day. Every delay has consequences. Soviet commanders, initially paralyzed by the scale of the German invasion, are adapting quickly. Retreats become more deliberate. Defensive lines form along natural barriers, rivers, forests, swamps, that the German maps underestimate or misrepresent entirely. The Dnieper, the Daugava, countless unnamed streams that swell without warning. Each one steals time. General Heinz Guderian, commander of Panzer Group 2, fumes in his headquarters. His tanks are built for speed, his doctrine centered on relentless advance. But speed without fuel, without bridges, without roads, is meaningless. He sends sharp messages up the chain of command, warning that delays are mounting and opportunities slipping away. The replies are evasive. Berlin demands results. The high command insists the enemy is near collapse. Moscow is still the prize, still the focus. The maps insist it is reachable before autumn. On the ground, officers begin improvising. Units are rerouted along paths that do not exist on paper. Local villagers are pressed into service as guides, their directions scribbled hastily in pencil on margins already crowded with corrections. Rivers are crossed at unmarked fords discovered through trial, error, and loss. A half-track attempts to cross where the map suggests solid ground. It disappears nose first into the water, engines sputtering before dying entirely. Crewmen scramble out, soaked and furious. The vehicle is a total loss. Each incident chips away at confidence, not in the enemy, but in the plan itself. By mid-July, German casualties from accidents, breakdowns, and exhaustion rival those from combat. Horses collapse mid-stride. Trucks are abandoned and stripped for parts. Tanks are cannibalized to keep others running. At night, staff officers sit hunched over their maps, redrawing lines that mean less and less. The neat geometry of the invasion dissolves into a mess of question marks and crossed-out routes. One officer, exhausted beyond caution, mutters what many are thinking but few dare say aloud. We are fighting the country itself. As the rivers continue to swell and the distances stretch endlessly eastward, it becomes clear that the Soviet Union is not just an opponent. It is an environment that devours assumptions. And the maps, once the foundation of German confidence, have become dangerous lies. July 20th, 1941. Army Group Center Headquarters. Near Orsha. Night. ***. A single lamp throws harsh light across the command table, illuminating maps layered one atop another. Pins bristle from the paper like thorns. Red arrows, once clean and confident, now bend and hesitate, their tips smudged where hands have paused too long. General Oberst Fedor von Bock stands with his arms crossed, staring down at the map of Western Russia. His expression is rigid, controlled, but the tension is unmistakable. Around him, staff officers speak in low voices, trading numbers that refuse to align. Fuel deliveries are 12 hours behind schedule. Rail conversion is slower than projected. The distance between depots is greater than anticipated. Greater than anticipated. The phrase hangs in the air, absurd in its understatement. On paper, the march from the border to Smolensk looked manageable. On the ground, it has become an ordeal of endless movement through space that seems to stretch as units advance. Villages are farther apart than expected. Forests swallow columns whole. Roads vanish into nothingness, forcing detours that add miles, sometimes dozens of them, to already strained supply routes. The German army has never fought a war like this. In Poland and France, distances were measured in hours. Here they are measured in days. And each day erodes the offensive edge that Blitzkrieg depends upon. A panzer division might spearhead forward 40 or 50 miles, only to halt, immobilized, waiting for fuel that is still crawling along broken roads far behind. Infantry divisions march until feet bleed, then march again. Horses die by the thousands, their carcasses dragged off the road to clear paths for vehicles that may never arrive. The maps do not show this. They show towns neatly spaced, supply depots logically positioned, railheads conveniently located. They do not show the empty spaces between, spaces that swallow men and machines alike. A young staff officer points to a spot east of Smolensk. If we shift the supply route here, he suggests, we can shorten the distance. Von Bock looks at him sharply. According to what? The officer hesitates. According to the map, Herr General. A silence follows. No one laughs, because everyone in the room knows what that means now. At the front, soldiers feel the truth long before it reaches headquarters. A motorized regiment pushes east toward a village marked prominently on their charts. When they arrive, they find a handful of wooden huts and nothing else. No wells, no food, no shelter. The village has been stripped bare by retreating Soviet forces. The men bivouac in the open, gnawing on hard bread, their trucks low on fuel. Another unit marches toward a rail junction expected to support resupply. The tracks are there, rusted and warped, but the station has been destroyed. No louke moetips. No warehouses. Nothing usable. Every assumption collapses one by one. Soviet commanders, increasingly confident, exploit the depth of their territory. They trade space for time, retreating beyond the reach of German supply lines, forcing the invaders to stretch themselves thinner with every advance. Small counterattacks flare up unexpectedly, not to defeat the Germans outright, but to disrupt already fragile logistics. A blown bridge here, a sabotaged road there. Each act compounds the problem. German soldiers begin to joke darkly about the maps. They call them wishful thinking or Berlin geography. Some stop consulting them altogether, relying instead on instinct, local guides, or sheer guesswork. In one division, an officer orders his men to follow a route marked as a secondary road. After 2 days of struggling through forest and swamp, he learns the road was last used by carts decades earlier. The realization spreads quietly but inexorably. This war is not being lost in battle. It is being bled dry by distance. As July draws toward August, the advance continues, but slower now, heavier, burdened. The maps are still there, still consulted, still annotated. But their authority is broken. They no longer represent reality. They represent a hope that is slipping farther east with every mile. And somewhere beyond those miles, Moscow waits, closer on paper than it has ever been. August 3rd, 1941, near Yelnya, afternoon. ***. The sky darkens without warning. What begins as a distant rumble quickly swells into a low, rolling thunder that seems to press against the ground itself. Men glance upward uneasily as the first drops fall. Large, heavy, deliberate. Within minutes, rain sheets down across the countryside, flattening grass, turning dust into paste, and roads into something else entirely. Mud. Oberleutnant Karl Weiss watches helplessly as the lead truck in his supply column spins its wheels and sinks. The tires dig deeper with every futile attempt to move. The driver revs the engine once more, then kills it, slumping forward over the steering wheel. Weiss steps into ankle-deep sludge and opens his map case. According to the chart, this road is a secondary all-weather route. He almost laughs. The Rasputitsa, the infamous Russian season of mud, has arrived early. German planners knew of it in theory. It appeared in reports, footnotes, side discussions. But it was never given real weight in operational planning. The maps show roads as fixed, dependable features. They do not change color when it rains. They do not dissolve. In reality, the roads of Western Russia are inseparable from the weather. Built without proper drainage, composed of compacted earth rather than stone, they transform rapidly. A single storm can halt an army. And now the storms are coming regularly. Columns stretch for miles immobilized. Men push vehicles until their muscles give out. Horses thrash and scream as wagons tip and sink. Engineers lay down logs, planks, anything they can find, creating makeshift corduroy roads that collapse almost as fast as they are built. Fuel consumption skyrockets as engines strain against resistance. Breakdowns multiply. Maintenance crews work around the clock, hands raw, eyes burning, trying to keep machines alive in conditions they were never designed for. The maps offer no guidance. They do not indicate which roads become rivers of mud after rain. They do not mark low-lying areas that flood overnight. They do not show where streams overflow and swallow entire stretches of track. At headquarters, frustration turns into argument. Reports arrive late, incomplete, contradictory. One division claims a route is passable. Another insists it is impassable. Commanders reroute units based on outdated information, sending columns straight into the same quagmires that trapped others days earlier. General Halder reads weather summaries with growing unease. Rainfall totals exceed expectations. Forecasts are unreliable. He notes in his diary that operations are being seriously hindered by terrain and weather. Still, the pressure from above does not relent. Berlin wants Moscow. The Führer wants momentum restored. Orders are issued to press on, to overcome difficulties through will and discipline. But will does not harden mud. At the front, soldiers adapt in small, desperate ways. Boots are wrapped in rags to keep them from being sucked off by the ground. Men sleep sitting upright on vehicles to avoid sinking into the muck. Rations are stretched. Tempers flare. A tank commander stands knee-deep in sludge, staring at his immobilized Panzer III. France was a road, he says bitterly. This is a swamp. The land itself has become an enemy. Soviet forces exploit the pause. Defensive lines stiffen. Fresh units arrive from the east, transported along rail networks that the Germans cannot yet use. Time, precious, irreplaceable time, flows in the Red Army's favor. Every day lost to mud is a day Moscow grows more distant. And still, the maps lie open on tables and hoods, their neat lines mocking the chaos they fail to capture. They show progress where there is none, certainty where only uncertainty exists. By mid-August, the German advance has not stopped, but it has lost its rhythm. The lightning war slows to a grind, and beneath the boots of every marching soldier, the ground reminds them of a truth no map can deny. Russia is not a place you cross. It is a place that absorbs you. August 18th, 1941. Western approaches to Moscow. Evening. ***. The sun drops behind a line of birch trees, casting long shadows across a road that no longer deserves the name. It is a churned ribbon of mud and broken boards, littered with abandoned equipment. Axles snapped, wagons overturned. A truck burned out where its engine finally gave up. Colonel Viktor Sokolov watches from the edge of the forest, binoculars steady in his hands. He listens to the sounds drifting from the road. Shouted orders in German, engines coughing, the slap of boots against wet earth. The enemy is moving again, but slowly, painfully. This is new. In the first weeks of the invasion, Soviet commanders had been overwhelmed by speed. German units appeared where maps said they should not be, moving faster than anyone believed possible. Entire divisions were encircled before they understood what was happening. But now the rhythm has changed. Sokolov lowers his binoculars and turns to the officers around him. They are tied to the roads, he says quietly, and the roads are betraying them. The Red Army is learning fast. Soviet staff study captured German maps with a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. The inaccuracies are obvious to anyone who knows the land. Roads that vanish in spring. Bridges washed out every year. Forest tracks that look inviting on paper but lead nowhere. Soviet commanders begin to shape their defenses around this knowledge. Instead of attempting to hold fixed lines, they anchor positions to terrain the Germans struggle to cross. Swamps, rivers, forests, low ground that turns to mud after rain. They blow bridges not where maps show alternatives, but where they know no alternatives exist. They retreat just far enough to stretch German supply lines past the breaking point. A German battalion advances toward a crossroads marked as vital on its map. When they arrive, Soviet artillery opens fire from positions hidden beyond a marsh the Germans cannot cross. Counterattacks come at night, striking supply columns rather than frontline units, forcing the Germans to divert combat troops to guard fuel trucks and wagons. Every diversion costs time. At Army Group Center headquarters, reports grow darker. The enemy is no longer collapsing. Soviet resistance stiffens with each passing week. Fresh divisions appear, men from Siberia, Central Asia, the Urals, moving along railways that still function deep inside the Soviet interior. German maps show rail hubs that should have been captured by now. In reality, those hubs lie farther east than expected, or have multiple branch lines never marked on German charts. General von Bock listens as an intelligence officer explains that Soviet units are maneuvering using routes the Germans did not anticipate. Routes not on our maps? Von Bock asks. Yes, Herr General. The implication is unmistakable. The Germans are fighting blind. At the front, soldiers feel it in their bones. Patrols move cautiously, unsure what terrain lies ahead. Reconnaissance units report forests that stretch for miles longer than expected. Rivers curve and double back, defying neat blue lines on paper. One company commander tears a corner from his map and scribbles notes directly onto it. Bog here. Bridge gone. Track only. Feels inadequate. Childish. But it is closer to the truth than anything printed. By late August, the German advance toward Moscow is no longer a dash. It is a stagger. Panzer units wait days for fuel. Infantry march until they collapse, then march again. Supply officers openly admit they cannot meet demand. Soviet forces sense the shift. Morale rises. Where once there was retreat and panic, now there is purpose. The land is no longer just home. It is a weapon. As darkness settles, Sokolov gives the order. Mortars open fire on the road, targeting a fuel convoy stalled in the mud. Flames leap into the night. German soldiers scatter, shouting, trying to save what they can. From the forest edge, Soviet troops melt away, leaving nothing but burning wrecks and more unanswered questions. The German maps show progress. The ground tells a different story. And somewhere ahead, autumn waits. Closer now with every passing day. September 6, 1941. Army Group Center Forward Command Post. Dawn. Asterisk asterisk. A thin frost clings to the grass, whitening the ground in patches that crunch softly underfoot. The air carries the sharp smell of autumn. Cold, metallic, final. Inside a hastily reinforced farmhouse serving as headquarters, officers huddle around a map table, breath visible as they speak. Operation Typhoon is about to begin. This, they are told, is the decisive blow. The final push to Moscow. One last surge of strength to end the war in the east before winter arrives. General Heinz Guderian stands rigid, hands resting on the edge of the table. His panzer group has been refitted, partially resupplied, scraped back together after weeks of strain. Tanks that broke down have been cannibalized to keep others running. Crews are exhausted but determined. The map in front of him shows clean arrows driving straight toward the Soviet capital. The confidence feels forced. According to the plan, breakthroughs will be rapid. Soviet defenses are expected to crumble under renewed pressure. The weather, for now, seems favorable. The ground is firm again. The mud has retreated, temporarily. But the map still lies. It shows roads capable of sustaining high-speed movement. It shows supply routes that can keep pace with armored thrusts. It shows a Soviet army on the brink of collapse. In reality, German units begin the offensive already hollowed out. When Typhoon launches, initial successes seem to vindicate the plan. Encirclements form near Vyazma and Bryansk. Tens of thousands of Soviet troops are captured. Headlines in Berlin speak of imminent victory. Yet beneath the surface, the same problems return with brutal speed. Fuel deliveries fall behind within days. Vehicles break down on routes that once again prove worse than indicated. Rail conversion crews cannot keep up. Infantry units lag behind the armor, leaving exposed flanks. The distances, always the distances, devour time and strength. A panzer regiment advances rapidly one day, only to halt the next, engine silent, waiting. Crews sleep inside tanks to stay warm. Officers argue over which road to take, knowing neither option is reliable. The map insists both are viable. Neither is. Soviet resistance hardens further. Defensive positions are layered in depth, anchored to terrain the Germans struggle to navigate. Forest belts conceal anti-tank guns. Rivers, once thought minor, become obstacles once again as autumn rains return. A German battalion commander reports that his men marched 2 full days to reach a supply point marked on the map, only to find it never existed. The depot had been planned, not built. The map recorded intention, not reality. At higher headquarters, tempers flare. Halder notes increasing friction between field commanders and Berlin. Requests for pauses are denied. The Führer demands speed. Moscow must fall. But speed requires roads. And roads require truth. The truth is that German logistics are stretched to their absolute limit. Every kilometer gained costs disproportionately more than the last. The army is advancing, but it is advancing on credit, burning fuel, men, and machines faster than they can be replaced. As September wears on, nights grow colder. Frost returns more frequently. Engines struggle to start. Men scavenge for winter clothing that was never issued in sufficient quantity. The map still shows Moscow just ahead. But for the first time, some officers begin to doubt whether the capital is reachable at all. Not because of Soviet strength alone, but because the ground between here and there has never been what the map promised. October 7, 1941. Near Vyazma. Morning, asterisk asterisk. Snow falls in wet, heavy flakes that melt on contact, soaking uniforms and turning earth into a gray, sucking paste. It is not a blizzard, not yet, but it is worse in its own way. The ground cannot decide whether it is frozen or liquid, and so it becomes both. A column of German infantry trudges forward in silence. Each step is an effort. Boots pull free with a sound like tearing cloth. Men lean forward under the weight of their packs, rifles slung low, breath steaming in the cold air. Unteroffizier Otto Klein checks his compass, then the map. According to the paper, the road ahead should lead them straight to a supply point less than 10 kilometers away. They have already marched twice that distance. The road has vanished entirely, swallowed by mud and churned into something unrecognizable by weeks of traffic. Wagons sit abandoned at odd angles, half buried, their contents looted or ruined by rain. A dead horse lies by the roadside, its harness still intact, eyes glazed. Klein folds the map carefully, as if doing so might restore its authority. It does not. This is the second Rasputitsa. The autumn thaw, the one German planners hoped to avoid, has arrived with brutal precision. Rain, sleet, and melting snow combine to paralyze movement across the front. Tanks bog down. Trucks sink. Artillery pieces must be manhandled forward inch by inch. The maps show roads. The roads no longer exist. At division headquarters, officers argue over routes that have become meaningless. One suggests a detour shown clearly on the chart. Another counters that the same route trapped an entire convoy 2 days earlier. Both are right, and both are wrong. Every option leads into the same nightmare. Engineers work themselves to exhaustion laying down logs, doors torn from abandoned houses, even corpses of trees cut from nearby forests to create temporary paths. These roads last hours at best before collapsing into the mud beneath them. Fuel becomes precious beyond measure. Engines are run only when absolutely necessary. Tanks are left behind not because they are damaged, but because moving them would consume more fuel than they are worth. Soviet units, now fully adapted to the conditions, strike with increasing confidence. They know which routes flood first, which low ground becomes impassable, which forest tracks remain usable even in the worst weather. They move where the Germans cannot. A German supply column, rerouted based on outdated information, blunders into a swampy area at night. Soviet artillery opens fire from concealed positions. Trucks burn. Ammunition explodes. Survivors scatter into the darkness, leaving behind vital supplies that will never reach the front. In Berlin, the maps still suggest progress. Arrows continue to creep toward Moscow. Distances are measured optimistically. Weather reports are downplayed. The belief persists that the enemy is on the brink of collapse. At the front, no one believes this anymore. Men write letters home describing endless mud, hunger, cold, and confusion. Officers speak openly of exhaustion. Even the most confident commanders acknowledge that the advance has slowed to a crawl. And still, orders arrive demanding movement. Push forward. Exploit success. Do not allow the enemy to recover. But recovery is no longer the issue. Survival is. As October deepens, the land tightens its grip. Every mile costs lives, not always to bullets or shells, but to exposure, disease, and despair. The army that once moved with mechanical precision now staggers, weighed down by terrain it never truly understood. The maps lie open, pages stained with mud and rain, corners torn, markings overwritten again and again. They no longer guide, they accuse. And as the first hard frosts begin to return at night, one unspoken realization settles over the German army. Winter is coming, and the map has no answer for it. October 20th, 1941. Forward Command Post, Army Group Center. Night. Asterisk asterisk. A stove crackles weakly in the corner of the room, failing to drive out the cold that seeps through the walls. Frost has formed on the inside of the windows, delicate white patterns spreading across the glass. Officers sit wrapped in greatcoats, hunched over a map illuminated by a single shaded lamp. Moscow is there, so close now, On the paper, it is less than 100 kilometers away. Generaloberst Franz Halder traces the final approach with a pencil. His movements slow and deliberate. The red arrows point inward, converging like a tightening noose. Vyazma, Mozhaysk, the final defensive belt. According to the map, the German army is on the verge of victory. According to reality, the army is barely moving. Reports arrive in fragments. Units advance a few kilometers, then stop. Fuel shortages.
Vehicles frozen obernit.
Roads impassable again after fresh snowfall. Men without proper winter clothing falling sick in alarming numbers. Yet the map refuses to acknowledge any of this. It shows firm lines, clear routes, calculated distances. It suggests that if the army simply pushes a little harder, Moscow will fall. Field commanders no longer trust it. A corps commander reports that his men reached a point marked as a major crossroads. In truth, it was a frozen clearing with 3 indistinct tracks leading into forest. Choosing the wrong one cost an entire day, and several vehicles that vanished into a ravine never marked on any chart. Another division reports that a rail line shown feeding Moscow from the west had been diverted years earlier. Soviet engineers had built alternative routes, invisible to German intelligence. Fresh Red Army units continue to arrive, even as German logistics grind to a halt. The contradiction becomes unbearable. On the maps, the Soviet Union is shrinking. On the ground, it feels infinite. Officers begin to speak openly of deception, not by the enemy, but by their own assumptions. The maps were never malicious. They were simply incomplete, outdated, optimistic. They reflected what planners wanted Russia to be, not what it was. The realization spreads quietly, painfully. This war was planned as a campaign of movement, of speed, of precision. Instead, it has become a test of endurance against space, climate, and terrain. At the front, soldiers feel Moscow not as a destination, but as a rumor. They hear distant artillery on clear nights. They glimpse church domes on the horizon only to realize later they were mirages created by fatigue and frost. Every step forward feels heavier than the last. A tank crew abandons its vehicle when the engine seizes from cold and lack of maintenance. They spike the gun and march westward, hoping to find another unit. The map says friendly lines are close. They are not. As October turns toward November, snow begins to fall in earnest. The ground hardens, briefly improving mobility, but at a terrible cost. Temperatures plunge. Engines refuse to start. Weapons malfunction. Men lose fingers and toes to frostbite. The map does not record temperature. It does not show suffering. It does not show the quiet erosion of an army's strength. And still, Moscow remains circled in red pencil. Taunting, unreachable, closer on paper than it has ever been in truth. November 5, 1941. Near Klin. Pre-dawn. ***. The engine coughs once, then dies. Oberfeldwebel Martin Hesse sits motionless in the driver's seat of his half-frozen truck, hands still on the wheel, breath fogging the cracked windshield. He waits a few seconds, then tries the ignition again. Nothing. Just the brittle click of metal protesting the cold. Outside, the temperature has dropped well below freezing. Snow squeaks under boots. Somewhere in the darkness, a man is crying out. Frostbite, maybe, or simply exhaustion finally breaking through discipline. Hesse climbs down and opens the hood. The engine block is a sculpture of ice and grime. There is no fuel left to waste warming it. No spare parts. No miracle coming. He reaches into his coat and pulls out the map. Even now, the paper is stiff, edges curled, stained with mud and grease. He unfolds it slowly, careful not to tear it in the cold. The road he is supposed to be on is clearly marked. The supply route. Reliable. Direct. Hesse looks up. The road is a frozen trench, churned by weeks of traffic, filled with snow and debris. Ahead, a Soviet artillery shell has blown a crater straight through it. There is no going forward. No going back. He folds the map and stuffs it into his pocket. For the first time since the invasion began, he does not look at it again. Across Army Group Center, this quiet act is repeated thousands of times. Maps are no longer consulted first. They are checked last, if at all. Decisions are made by sight, by sound, by instinct. Commanders ask villagers where the ground holds. Engineers probe frozen soil with bayonets. Patrols move not toward objectives, but toward anything that looks passable. The illusion has collapsed. At higher headquarters, the reckoning is unavoidable. General Halder reads reports that no longer soften the truth. Units are combat ineffective. Supply lines have failed. Casualties from cold rival those from enemy fire. Entire formations are immobilized not by Soviet resistance, but by environment. The maps, once symbols of control, are now evidence of error. They did not account for depth. They did not account for weather. They did not account for a country that shifts with the seasons and absorbs invaders into its vastness. Most of all, they did not account for time. Every kilometer advanced in summer demanded 2 in autumn. Every day lost to mud or snow was a day the Red Army used to rebuild, reinforce, and prepare. On November 7th, Soviet forces parade in Red Square, even as German artillery can be heard in the distance. Fresh divisions march through the snow, straight from Siberia, trained for winter, equipped for cold. German maps show no such movement. They show no Siberia. They show no reserves. They show a Soviet Union that should already be dead. The counteroffensive begins quietly in December. German units, stretched thin and frozen in place, are struck along multiple sectors. The ground, now hard as iron, favors the defenders who know where to move and how to survive. For the first time, German forces retreat, not as a maneuver but as a necessity. Orders arrive too late. Withdrawals are chaotic. Equipment is abandoned. Men stumble westward through snowstorms, guided by memory rather than charts. The map that once promised victory is useless now, cannot show how to escape. As the winter deepens and the front stabilizes far short of Moscow, one truth becomes undeniable, even to the highest command. Operation Barbarossa did not fail because the German army lacked courage or skill. It failed because it tried to conquer a place it never truly understood, a place it had reduced to lines on paper. And paper, in Russia, does not stop the cold.